All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Quetzal Talk. Today we have a special guest from the Museum of Archaeology here in El Paso. We have Sebastian Ribas. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us in your office. What's archaeology in anyway?
Archaeology is considered kind of like a science, but basically is the study of ancient cultures through their remains, and how do you learn something about those cultures that sometimes don't have any language, anything left to us in writing, how we can interpret them based on a few artifacts that we can find, a few remains that we can find. So archaeology basically takes care of that, and and as I say, it is a science because it kind of mixes with the other sciences and associates with the other sciences. So you will work very closely with anthropologists sometime to compare what these people from the past could have done based on the uh, ways that some of the Native American tribes of actual times do.
Okay, so
Uh,
is that the difference between archaeology and anthropology?
yes, sir. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Anthropology is the study of the people and their ways. Uh, Normally studying people and cultures that are still alive. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I always was confused in the
It's a little
difference.
confusing. It's kind of like sometimes we will touch paleontology too, because you might have a site that you find fossils,
Yeah.
and then you need to have that person that can interpret those pieces. But at the same time, as an archaeologist, I will look into why those pieces are there,
Huh.
why these people were collecting those pieces, what they were doing with them. So there's a lot of interpretations. Plus, you have other very scientific groups that come into play also, like palynologists, uh, people that are specialized on soil itself, and people that does the radiocarbon dating for us too. So it's a lot of disciplines that come together. So
Wow, it's a
archaeology,
huge mix. It
yeah,
makes it seem like it's just one little thing when you hear
exactly.
about it, but it's
Hmm.
everything. That's cool.
Yeah, so it's a very fascinating field. You know, uh, Not the one that has the most outlets, of course. It doesn't have that charm that other jobs will have. But once you are in it, I think it has its big rewards.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. And then you personally, how did you get into involved in archaeology? What made you pursue this career?
Well, my story is it could take us like a couple of days to go through it. But to make it short and sweet, I was a student of art history in Spain. I come from Spain.
Oh, wow.
And one of my classes in college was archaeology. And I was offered to do actually field work to get extra credit. So I started that and I ended getting into it more and more and more. I worked for close to 8 years with a museum over there in Spain, an
Mhm.
archaeological museum. And then after coming here to the US and after various jobs, I ended working at the History Museum downtown El Paso for 15 years. And then they offered me the position here as the director for the Museum of Archaeology. So I'm back into archaeology again in a different way because here my job is to present, safeguard, and interpret what I
Oh,
have in
okay.
my collections. I'm not doing hands-on
Oh,
archaeology.
you're not in the field as much
No,
anymore.
sir. No,
Oh,
no.
okay. No, but I mean that's still an important job. The interpretation. That's I mean that's a science, but also kind of like an art. No.
Truly, yes. I mean, you're not wrong on that one. I think it's very interesting to be able to grab something that you might have in your collections and tell a story with it. And what's more important, I think, and why we are here to me, is for that person that goes through my doors every day to come and visit this location, this museum, to come out learning something new, to come out with an appreciation for something new, to learn something that they didn't know, to get them excited about archaeology itself, or to get them excited about another science. I mean, I'm showcasing also fossils, I'm showcasing some rocks and minerals. We are also not only an archaeological museum, but we have a huge park outside of our doors. So nature is a big part in our mission too.
Oh
So
yeah, the
we,
trails around here are
yeah.
beautiful.
So we teach about flowers, plants, animals, too, of the Chihuahuan Desert. So our mission is very varied, and obviously it revolves about the archaeological side of it. But on the long run, we are touching a lot of ends, and we are trying to reach out to the most people that we can.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so can you tell me a little bit about the, I guess, the history around here, like the archaeology history around here?
Okay, so to make it a little bit simpler and easy to understand, we should go back in time about 12,000 years ago. And that's where you have what is called Paleo-Indian period. So you have nomadic people walking around in this region, basically pursuing game, large game.
Okay.
We are talking about mammoth, mastodon, that roam this area. Also, you had like giant sloths.
Okay.
You had bison. You had like huge wolves,
Like the big
saber-toothed
dire
cats.
wolves.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man.
So you had a lot of that fauna, and but these people were not staying in this region for long. They were moving along
Oh, okay.
as they were needing. Um, One thing in respect to these people, and we mentioned 12,000 years ago, this day nowadays is in discussion because White Sands National Park made a great discovery
Oh,
in
correct.
2018 and 19. And that date nowadays goes to about 23,000 years ago. So we've gone 10,000 years before the
Wow,
date that we
man.
had. Those people were around here already. What is being told is like probably the ice wall that was here in the Americas, in North America, was melting periodically, allowing some groups of people
Oh,
to
okay.
pass, but then they will find themselves locked out
Oh,
and
when you
not
come.
being able to go back
Huh.
north. So, you know, that explains a very fascinating point about the Native Americans here in the US and also through the rest of the continent. You have sometimes groups that have very, very, very close DNA, very isolated DNA.
Oh, okay.
And that could come from these original
Huh.
groups that populated sparsely the continent.
And just
Um,
to clarify, so that the audience know, you're talking about the fossilized footprints that were found in White Sands, correct?
that's correct.
Because we had David Bustos on our show, and he talked about them a
Yes.
little.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, courtesy of him and some of his staff, that's what we have here. We have a small exhibit also on that, you know, with some of the casts that the
Oh
park
man.
has done. So, very interesting items and artifacts. Um, After these people come through, you have a period that is called archaic period, in which you will see how the scenery and the landscape starts to change from like very wet um, environment and having a lot more trees that we see nowadays around here in this region. You will slowly go into a desert ecosystem. Slowly, very slowly. We are talking about like probably a range of about close to 8,000 years. Uh,
Yeah, that is long.
so these people, what is interesting about them is like they have a nomadic attitude, so they are still moving around, but in the region, they are not leaving the region,
Okay.
and they create settlements of huts built with brush and just whatever they have at hand, basically. But they move on. And towards the end of the period, of the archaic period, what you see is a shift about trying to domesticate plants. And that is really what will get you into the formative period, which is when the Jornada Mogollón, which is the people that we call in this area, in this particular region here, um, lived. The formative period is very important because that it starts with the beginning of agriculture. So you have somebody that learn or figure out how to I can grab this wild plant and make it grow and give me seeds and make it grow more, and that way I can feed my family and my clan, my group. Um, and another important thing appears, which is ceramics. Until then, there were no ceramics. Everything was done with vegetable fibers, so you had basketry, obviously. Probably we don't have that many remains of that. There are some, but during that period with the Jornada Mogollón, you can see how ceramic begins with very simple pots, and then it evolves via communication with other cultures that are surrounding you into something more beautiful, more meaningful, with artistry and the evolution of man, basically.
Yeah. And this was considered kind of isolated, right? Correct? The Americas like agricultural event was considered isolated from like Europe
In a
and Africa.
way, yes, because the continent, uh, the main idea is obviously that men came through the Bering Straits by Alaska, so means of Russia, and then crossing the sea on a land bridge and getting themselves into a brand new full country. Um, it's a very interesting theory, but as anything else and any other theories, it can have loopholes. Um, one of them is like you have sites that have been found in South America that are being dated about 38,000 years old. So it makes you wonder if man arrived to the Americas in other different ways, other means. You know what? Somebody could have floated on a raft and just arrive to the shores of South America easy
Yeah, just by
and start.
using the what are the Gulf streams, correct? Like,
Those are possibilities, but you cannot disregard those things when you're in archaeology. You have to be always constantly thinking about those possible options. What is written is not an absolute because we don't have written records, so you don't know for sure what happened. Even when you have written records, you should discuss them because normally history is written by the person that really controls the world at that moment.
correct.
I mean, they always say the winner writes the history and the loser writes their history, and you
Oh
see two
yeah,
different
man.
points. So we are there just to kind of try to learn and interpret based on real artifacts. uh, if our interpretation is wrong, that's okay. You know what? There'll come somebody else and have a different way of interpret that piece and say, "Oh no, that was used for this, or that was used for that." So it's always going to be like that, and it's not a perfect science. I will say that.
Yeah, that's why I was saying it's kind of like an art because you have to kind of like, I guess, using your own inspiration or intuition in a way.
That's correct. It's a little bit of guesswork. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's fascinating. But these, I can't really pronounce it with a Horgon Mogolon
Jornada
or okay, or Nada Mogolon,
mogollón.
Moyon.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, were these people connected with the Ananansi? I think that's how you say it. The like the ruins up in New Mexico.
Uh-huh. Okay. So we don't use that word anymore, Anasazi.
Oh, okay.
We call them ancestral Puebloans because they are the direct descent the pueblos that we have nowadays in New Mexico
Oh,
um, and Arizona too. They are direct descendants of these people via a lot of generations, obviously. But yes, there's been a full interaction here, and the ancestral Puebloans were not the only ones. You need to keep in mind that there were other cultures also in Arizona. You have the Hohokam also, and then in Mexico in North Mexico, you have Casas Grandes too, which is a very important cultural center. So the Jornada that were living here were part of a bigger um, group that was called Jornada by itself. And then that includes the Mimbres people. I don't know if you're familiar with Mimbres,
No, I'm
but
not.
that's the Mimbres Valley north of Deming, New Mexico. They are very well known worldwide because of the renowned ceramics, decorated ceramics painted.
Oh, okay.
They are very exquisite, very ornate, with figures, very unique. So a lot of people always has wondered what led them to do those beautiful pieces. What was the reasoning behind them doing that, and the other cultures in the Southwest not doing uh, or not doing exactly the
Yeah.
same thing. Um, Obviously, beliefs are very personal sometimes, and when a culture dies, a lot of that history behind those pieces is lost.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. But yeah, the Jornada Mogollón were heavily influenced by those cultures surrounding them. They were trading with them. So you have pieces from those cultures that come into this region and pieces from our region that go outwards to those areas. So it's very interesting because you can see that despite what we will think that it was uh, kind of like an isolated area, because we look at the desert and we are like, oh my god, who will walk like during 3 days into this, no, they were doing that. They had trade routes, they had a lot of interchange. Casas Grandes, precisely in Mexico, was born as a trade center like that. I mean, they were manufacturing, literally manufacturing
Huh.
ceramics, materials in lithics like manos and metates, just to trade.
Huh.
Once that place was dug in, the archaeologists found enormous quantities of material in those rooms, in those ruins, that the only explanation is uh, they had to trade it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's fascinating. So a lot of people just think it'd be like all unsophisticated or just like, you know, I guess savages like the traditional like view, but that sounds really more sophisticated
yeah,
than.
yeah, I think they were way more sophisticated than we think. I will completely affirm that. Um, Even in their beliefs, I think they were more complex than what we think they are. It's very hard. When you're talking about a prehistoric religion, you are going really uh, just hitting the wall with your stick like if you were a blind person. Uh, and it's a lot of guesswork. Um, there's always been that joke around that when an archaeologist finds something that they cannot explain, they will say, oh, it's ritual, you know and that's an easy way out. But honestly, you need to be careful with your interpretation. um, you never should interpret based on only one find. You should have always a parallel find, so you can have 2 points of view, and then you can say, okay, now I have this that kind of proves my idea. So yes, I'm channeling towards something that is a little bit more serious and more maybe correct. It doesn't mean that I'm right, but I think I have a little bit more scientific backing on that one.
Okay, yeah, and that's where the science come in, and you can
Yes,
actually
sir.
like, do you actually like perform statistics with that or anything? Or
Yes, there's a lot of statistics. I mean, like amounts of material found. Um, Also, we analyze like provenance. So if you find a stone tool, you will look for where that
okay,
particular stone mineral comes from. And it can be miles away. So that will blow you off because you're going to be like, what the heck? Um, how, this travels 100, 300 miles from this particular location. Um, so it is fantastic. It's a very wonderful area of study because you can learn so much. And the ceramics is the same thing. They will come sometimes from very far away, and then some other times you will figure out that, oh, look at that. If we look at the paste of the ceramic, we're gonna see that it was made locally. So these people were very smart. They decided that we're gonna copy that style and distribute it here.
Right.
So we don't have to be wasting, you know, we don't have money, but we are trading with things that are valuable. So if I can save that trading and trade something cheaper locally, there you go. So you had business people, basically.
Yeah, it's some
You know,
smart.
it's a business mentality, which is very interesting. So you know, economy has been there always. I think that's a human trait, to interchange, change ideas. I think that was the beginning,
And then innovate, and then there's
and
always someone
then
that's gonna
and then
innovate.
somebody is gonna change things and innovate it and make it newer and make it more exciting, and there you go. That's where we are right now. You know, now we're in a society that just consumes,
Oh yeah.
you know, insanely. It's like a sickness, you know, because everything is easier to produce, you know,
Yeah.
and we are causing more issues than we are fixing things on the long run, because obviously, you know, recycling and all that, it should be like a huge part in our lives nowadays. And these people had that right. I think they were more more tied up with nature. They understood that they depended from nature.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and I think it gets to the point that if they were not able to sustain their, uh, I'll call them clans or family groups, um, they will move forward and they will go to somewhere else where they could find the same situation or the same needs uh, for living,
Yeah.
so they could not exhaust that section of land. Um, I think it was very important. It's been proven, because another thing that the Jornada Mogollón it's important for is like you have finally the construction of houses, real houses. I mean, you have the above ground pueblos made in Adobe. So, you know, we haven't invented nothing. They did Adobe before we did Adobe. Okay. So, some of those settlements, it's been proven by archaeologists that they were not lived through the whole year. They
Oh,
will
okay.
spend time to build those things, those houses, but then they will abandon them for a certain time, and then either them, we don't know if it was the same group or a different group, will come again and again and live in that settlement for a while. So what you probably are looking into here, especially in this region, is kind of like following the water. You know,
Mhm.
you will be occupying certain spaces when you had rainy seasons. Why? Because the rain will come down from the mountains, form an ephemeral lake that will hold water for a few weeks, even months sometimes. So that will allow you to have some crops. But once that water is gone, you
Oh
have to
yeah.
move forward. So I think they were sedentary, but at the same time, they will move around quite a lot too.
Okay, like you said, following the water season.
Yeah, yeah, and you can see the water importance also in their beliefs. Um, if we get into another very interesting aspect of these people is the rock art that they left behind. So either a pictogram which is painted on the rocks or a pictograph which is etched on the rocks. You will see that a lot of them have a heavy relation with water, being representing water itself, or more subtly, they will showcase animals, but animals that on the long run represent water, represent life. So it's very, very, very fascinating to see how their beliefs were very much complex than we think.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And in terms of the agriculture, what what was grown around here in
Uh,
that time?
well, the crops, we owe the crops, I will say, to Mesoamerica. So Mayan and Aztecs. I think those are your first two main agriculturalists in the region, in the larger region. Um, Somehow this probably arrives to us because we cultivate what we call the Three Sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash. Those were the three main ones. Um, Corn has a long story of being cultivated from a little wild plant that had like no cob, pretty much,
Yeah.
to what it is now, which is like a huge corn cob that it's almost like a foot long sometimes. Genetic crossing also has done a lot. And I think these people kind of understood that maybe cross pollination of a couple of species were going to give them something new. So I think there was a concept and experimentation on their end because you can see through the ages how the corn grows in size, changes. There's different plants from the same family developing. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Huh.
experimentation. The squash is a little bit different because that's more a natural plant. We actually, if you walk on our grounds and you go on our trails, you will see a couple of squash plants that are there, and there's a couple of them that are growing squash like gourds. So they are there. They are there. They grow natural. Um, and then the beans is also another natural plant that they probably figured out that if we replant it, it will grow again. Those were their three big staples. But don't be fooled that agriculture was the main thing. Uh, they were also foragers, and here the desert offers a variety, incredible variety of plants and animals that you can sustain life with. Obviously, hunting was probably the minor, but you need meat to survive. And I know for a fact that rabbits, jackrabbits, were probably one of the recurrent meals for them. It's been more than proven that bones have been found in sites all over the region, so they were regularly hunted. But also you had like deer, and you had antelope too, pronghorn antelope.
Damn, they were able to catch pronghorn?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta remember you had bow and arrows,
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
and their technology was very advanced for that. I mean, you can see some of those arrows, and you are like, wow. I mean, some of them are less than an inch long, made in stone. Plus, probably also a big factor was birds and fowl, waterfowl. I think with the river here,
Yeah.
it was very, very important for them. Another food that was extremely interesting and people don't see too much is fish.
Yeah.
There used to be a lot of fish in the rivers in this region, up to the point that you see it represented in the rock art on the rocks. You will
Damn, it
see
was that
fish.
abundant?
Yeah, I think it was fairly abundant, and so they were probably going there as a good source of protein. Actually, that's a very good source. But then also plants of the desert, like the yucca plant, like creosote, all those plants were giving you a part of possible food. They were giving you fibers and other items that you needed to create clothing, to create ropes, a lot of things that you needed for living. So I think on the long run, what you need to do when you look at the Jornada Mogollón is like to see a well-rounded people, very smart use of the environment, but at the same time, very conscious of other cultures that are surrounding them, how that eventually influences them and creates changes that you can see normally with their housing and ceramics. The ceramics become more and more decorated, more big. There's an evolution through it. So there's a story there to tell that through that association, you can tell that there was something happening, some change happening. Obviously, if you see the world, and that's a good example, you go on a trip to another country, uh, especially if it's very foreign to you, you will come back with new ideas. You will see something new, and you will be like, "Why we're not doing that?" You know, or why we don't need this?
Yeah.
Why is only there? So that was the same case. I think traders were probably a key component in that world that is gone now. We know traders on the eastern U.S. Tribes. We know a little bit more of stories about them and how they used to be. And we know the component that they were playing. They were people that were looked upon when they will come to the site, when they will arrive. Kids will go to them. Everybody will go to them. Why? Because they will bring you news from afar, so you will know, it was kind of like your newscast, oh, here comes the trader, we're going to learn what's going on in the south now.
So he's a celebrity in town.
If there's something new happening, there's a new people living down there or something like that. It was not only what he was bringing, but the ideas, the stories that they could bring to, I think, were very important. And I think here in the Southwest also it was the same thing. We had those trade routes. They are there. We've seen it. Specialized for ceramics, for stone. So you can tell that somehow that is the channel that was used to bring that newness into some of the tribes and some of the people that were living in the area as the Jornada Mogollón were.
And how are these trails? Were they just trails or were they actually like kind of roads?
Nah, they're probably walking trails. I mean, and it's very hard to figure out exactly what was the trace of them. The only place that I know some of the traces have been found, it will be the area around Chaco Canyon. Over there, you have like an area where roads are marked. So, and by roads, I talk more about white paths, because these people were walking. They were not using any other type of method of transportation. Maybe rivers were used. I don't know. We haven't found any kind of boat-like, canoe-like implement like in other regions of the U.S. But you couldn't discard that. I mean, maybe at certain seasons you could navigate the river, at least to come down.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility.
But then they would be made out of vegetable fiber, so it's really hard to preserve that, no?
True. Yeah, exactly. It would have been probably a very ephemeral type of raft, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, until you don't find something like that, you're not going to know if that was for sure or not. So there you go. Another theory for you.
Another guesswork that you have to do, right? And so you're probably always just thinking, and your mind's probably always boggled.
We are constantly thinking. It's amazing to see that and to because you have to. It's all about what if. You cannot go for sure that what you have on that book published 20 years ago, it's correct.
Yeah.
It might be, but it might not be. Why? Again, there's no written record, so I don't know for sure. Nobody put it on a piece of paper for me to tell me, hey, this pot was used for this.
Yeah.
So that's where, you analyze, you compare, you go through a scientific method, So even though it's a social science, it's scientific in itself.
Correct.
In the way that it runs.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables you have to look
Yeah,
after.
yeah, yeah. A lot of things can change. I mean, you can grab if you're lucky enough and you find a pot, a ceramic that it's on site, not broken. Um, you know, even to make it more wonderful, its cover, it has a cover, so you are like hopeful that maybe something remains in it,
Yeah.
even though it will be dust. But then you can send that dust to the laboratory, and the laboratory can tell you, you know what, the trace of corn, the trace of meat, and you're like, well, it was a soup, maybe, or stew,
Maybe.
or or it was a store, or it was used to store grain. uh, there's a lot of possibilities, but you see how those cross sciences come into play there.
Okay.
You need that person that knows about all those grains, all that pollen, so they can give you that information. An archaeologist cannot specialize himself or herself into all those. It will be impossible. So when you have a big dig, a big excavation, you will usually have a specialist on each area that knows what they are doing, and
Yeah.
you can consult there on site.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot better than I then. Instead of having to go like find them somewhere in the university and contact them.
Well, if you don't have the money, you're probably going to have very short staff. You're going to have a bunch of volunteers digging for you, and then you're going to have to go to the university to find the specialists.
Oh man, yeah. So yeah, everyone who's hearing that, try to fund archaeology if you can. It's very important to find out our history. So after these, I'm gonna butcher it again. Jornado,
Jornada?
the jornada. After the
Mogollon.
jornada, people who came or what did it evolve into?
What happens is on the year 1450, there is a sudden abandonment of all the settlements in this area. What archaeologists think is probably, I would say, probably like a combination of drought, no water coming in during several years, very bad crops, and overpopulation.
Mm,
There probably was too much people living in the area. So there are the two theories, as always. One of them says that they kind of disappear, but that's kind of like harsh and very brutal.
yeah.
You cannot click your fingers and just they're gone. We are not in a Marvel movie.
Right.
Uh,
Thanos came over and just snapped his finger.
yeah. So so the theory that is more accepted is like they move on somewhere else, and that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So what we're working on nowadays is like that they probably went up north,
Mm,
towards the area where Albuquerque is, and Santa Fe. You had people living there. There was water all year round, uh, proportioned by the higher mountains, snow in the winter. So you had more chances of survival. Plus, they had a lot of contact with that people already.
yeah.
So when they found themselves in a bind, I guess they probably decided, you know what, we're leaving this and we're moving forward, which is a very human attitude if you think about it. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes in our lives, because of necessity or, because of pressure by external elements, we have to move somewhere else. And I kind of compare it to the migrant crisis, but you know what?
Yeah.
It's kind of that. You know what? Imagine the people in the north. They probably found themselves with an influx of people that they were not expecting originally. So that's another thing that you have to think about. Did that create a conflict? Did
Yeah.
something happen there? Possibly, but on the long run, we know that at least some of the people that were living here made their way there. Why? Because we can see that in the culture that evolved there. We can see that in the rock art that is there. We can see that in the beliefs that are there. So somehow, what was created by what we call the Anasazi ancestral pueblo, and the people from the south, which will Jornada will be some of them, it created a new culture there, which we call the pueblos right now.
Okay.
But also like the ideology that you have, the Cachina ideology. I don't know if you're familiar with the Cachinas in
Yeah, a
New
little
Mexico.
bit.
So that comes from us, partially. That comes from us. Here you can
Huh.
see some representations in the rock art, and actually we can mention Hueco Tanks State Park. It's a prime source for like beautiful images. Uh, they have the biggest collection of masks in this region, and when you look at some of those masks, you are looking at Cachinas. That's the origin of Cachinas down here. Almost certainly. You know,
Oh, that's fascinating.
obviously it's not by itself. It mixes with other beliefs. But that tells you a story. That tells you that there's people
There's always.
mixing and, creating something new. So that's why we believe that when these people disappear from this region, they went up north. Now, what happens with our region? Well, you have the people that are called Athabascans of language, which the ones that we know the best are the Apache.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, these people come into the region from the north. They occupy that open space. Why? It was perfect for them. They are roamers. They are nomads. They move along. So we are back to the nomads again. This is very interesting. Um, but in in late 1500s, when you have the Spaniards that finally come into this region, when they come to the Rio Grande Valley, where El Paso and Ciudad Juarez are, they found themselves face to face with people that descend from those Athabascans. You have the Sumas and the Mansos. The Mansos are called like that. It's a Spanish word for like kind of like peaceful. So that tells you that they accepted the Spaniards willingly. And then the Sumas were a little bit more wild, more like what we imagine or what we are fed in the movies for the Apaches,
Yeah.
because actually the Apache are not that wild. Uh, the Apache were like people that were there already. You have the Spaniards that come and occupy the land, um, and the Apache find their land kind of constrained and reduced slowly by those Spanish settlements. So what will you do? Well, I will kind of try to retaliate, and in a way, the easiest way is like go and steal from the person that is there, the invader. So that's how the Apaches got a hold on horses, cattle, um, but that's only one side of the coin. When the Spanish come here, the Spanish also do the opposite. And the Apache themselves tell you a lot of stories of how they owe so much to the Spaniards and how they learn irrigation systems from the
Oh.
Spanish people, how they had other rudiments of medicine from them, um, how they learned to do stronger shields from them. So there's the interconnection and
Yeah.
interrelation.
So all you hear about is the conflict, but you forget like there was, like you said, there's
Yeah,
an interaction that
no,
was going.
and that comes and goes through time. Through time, you will see that sometimes it's more conflict, and that depending on where you're reading, what you're reading, you will see that the Spaniards are always conducting raids to try to stop, those heathens. Uh, but then, on the other hand, you listen to an elder from the Apache tribe, and they are going to be telling you a full different story. They are not going to deny raiding, and that was their life ways, but at the same time, they were learning from that invader. And to the point that nowadays, currently, they recognize a lot of times that they owe a lot to the Spanish people.
Huh. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's
It's very
interesting.
interesting, yeah. So you never should discard the point of view from the current native tribes. I think it's very important. It's very important, uh, and that's not from the archaeology viewpoint. That's from my point as a director of this museum here. I think we need to be up to date with uh, communicating with those tribes that we have surrounding us. And not even those. We even talk to people that are in New Mexico uh, because we want to be in contact. We want to breathe and live the current Native American way of living. Obviously, we're more in contact with the Isleta del Sur Pueblo.
Correct.
Those are the closest one to us. But don't forget that you have a Piro community in Cruces, and that you have the Mescalero Apache in Mescalero, New Mexico, just north of Alamogordo and Tula Rosa. So, very important to keep contact with them. I think we've been doing that for the last few months very actively, so we can show to our visitors another side of the coin, which a lot of people don't know about.
And that what you were talking about, their side of the story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how important to them is also the relationship with this land, with this particular place where we are standing. To them, this is still their land. We are in a reservation, but this was our ancestral land. We were here before you, and they have names for all the mountains. They have, so everything has a meaning to them. There's places that to us are just that places. To them, they are sacred. And I think that's where it comes again, what I mentioned before. As a museum, we need to educate the people. We need to educate the common person that has a misconception sometimes of what these native tribes might be.
Right.
They have
Yeah.
they have a richness to teach us. I think that's very important.
And then what happened to the Manso and Suma? Did they just totally integrate into other tribes or into the people in this area?
Yeah, yeah. Basically, what you have in 1680, you have what is called the New Mexico Revolt, the Pueblo Revolt. So the Spaniards have to escape very fast, and there's a small amount of people from the pueblos up there that decide to go with the Spaniards. Forcibly or non forcibly, that depends on what source you're reading. I think a lot of them came willingly. The Isleta del Sur Pueblo is one of them. The Piros are some of them too. Most of them settle here in the valley, and I think the Mansos and Sumas eventually they can end intermarrying with some of these tribes, so getting absorbed. And also they were marrying with the population that was here, like local. If you want to call them Mexicans, you can call them Mexicans. I don't think as much with the Anglo population because that comes later.
Yeah.
But I think you can see that integration. If there was a big nice point last week, I was in Ciudad Juarez actually, invited there by an retired professor from the Universidad Autónoma, and he took me to what is called a mission over there, but he told me, no, this is not a mission. This is an Indian church. So you have the Ascarate family that used to own land not only on this side of the border, that's why we have the Ascarate Park and Lake, but all the way into Juarez. And a small section was still where a group of Mansos used to live. And as Mr. Ascarate decided to build a church for them. So those were like portico churches. They were churches that were open to the outside. So the natives will come, worship obviously in a Christian way, and the priest from the main Mission Guadalupe, will come or send another priest to give mass every Sunday.
Oh.
So that's tells you that these tribes were still around and involved in the life.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very hard to know exactly what happens, which is of each of them. I mean, I know particularly on my side because I've read more maybe about them, about the Isleta del Sur Pueblo and the Piros, except the Piros that live in Cruces, at Tortugas Pueblo. uh, the ones that were in this region or down here in El Paso, they intermarried completely with uh, Mexicans, Mexican nationals, or with Isleta del Sur Pueblo
Okay.
tribe members. So, which is very interesting because then when you study Isleta del Sur Pueblo, you will find names that are of pure origin. So that tells you about that intermarrying.
Oh, okay, that's
So
cool.
it's very cool. But basically, they became a whole tribe from different tribes.
Huh. That's interesting. Like I love this like kind of story that you just see like constant change. That seems to be the only constant,
El Paso has never stopped. That's the whole thing. And if you wanted to go into contemporary times, yes, you have the Anglo population that comes in mid 19th century. Obviously, the gold rush in California in 1849 that was the big driver for opening trails and paths to come here to El Paso. But when you pass that and you enter in more in like end of that century and beginning of 20th century, what you realize is like El Paso was a huge immigrant area. We have people from all over the world coming in. I mean, Chinese communities, uh, Middle Eastern communities. We have a lot of Middle East population. Uh, the major exponent of them was Mr. Farah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They were
Huh.
of Lebanese origin, and they succeeded here. So that proves, it kind of ties with the story of the U.S. The U.S. is like a big immigrant country where everyone should have a chance to succeed. And I know that's the big discussion nowadays, because it's like, oh, we close the doors, we open the doors. Um, I'm not gonna get myself into that pickle. I'm not go political on that one. But to be honest with you, that's what we are. That's who we are. And El Paso, it's probably one of the biggest exponents in the country of that. We are such a huge melting pot that it's fascinating what we have.
I
And
know.
sometimes we are living our lives and we are completely oblivious to what we have. It's not only the old, which is all that we discuss. You know what? This is just a part of it. People comes and goes, and new people comes in, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening. There's new people coming in. I
Hell
mean,
yeah, man. So
it's very very interesting. You gotta let life go and continue. That's the way it works.
oh yeah, you got to let the flow go. Like, you
Yes, sir.
can't put a plug in it, or else that's how
Yep.
things break. I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you put the plug, you are creating conflict on the
Oh
long run.
yeah.
I think that's the issue normally.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you. This has been a great talk. It's like an awesome talk. So, thank you very much. But is there any, I guess, for anyone who's interested in the field, is there any advice you would like to give them?
Uh, you know what? We need archaeologists. I think that's a field that always will need people. There's always going to be something to be found. Um, but if you choose that alley, that's my advice. Stick to it. Don't let go. Be truthful to your beliefs. Continue the path. It's not easy. All of us that we've been in archaeology, or some other social science for that, we've had to find our way, take side jobs a lot of times just to survive. It's not the highest paying field. You will do this for love and passion more than monetary success. I think that's a way that you need to look at it. If it's in your heart, you will realize it very quick because it's like I don't like to say that word, but like a drug. It's very addictive, and once you get hooked up to it, you're not gonna stop digging. You will love it.
Oh yeah, man.
It's a fascinating field. There's always something new to learn, and I will say you feel like a little kid with a brand new candy or brand new toy every time that you make like one of those new discoveries or you find something that you never found before. You
Yeah.
will get that rush And
man.
you know, so it's very cool. So it has its perks, but it's very sacrificed.
Oh yeah.
You know, you if you are gonna dig, you are gonna spend hours on the field. You know, rain
Oh
or shine
yeah.
sometimes. You know, in very weird positions too. Sometimes, you know, because you need to mold yourself to what you are digging. You
And you have
know,
to be really careful and stuff. So,
exactly.
oh,
Or you
man.
will be digging in a cave and you are gonna be like folded. You know, literally.
Oh, like little like
Yeah,
holes and stuff.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man.
yeah. So you know,
Hey, but there's also an event. I mean, that's kind of adventure for whoever's into that. I mean, that's kind of fun.
it has the adventure thing. You know, I mean, we're not Indiana Jones. Forget about that one.
You didn't
No
find it.
Hollywood. Just take Hollywood off of your heads.
Before hell yeah, man. But if you like nature and if you like to be outside and if you like to discover new things, and
Correct.
it's for you,
Correct.
man.
Yeah, it's a good field. I mean, but you need to have it in your blood, and the only way that you will know is if you try it. And
So you recommend people taking a class, or how do you recommend people
I would
discover it?
recommend to go to their local colleges, universities, and see if there's any availability or need for volunteers for digs. And you know, usually there is. Um, and if that's the case, then volunteer to go dig. You know, you can do a few days, you can do a week, you can do 2 weeks.
Hmm.
It depends. I mean, every dig site is different. But then that way you get the chance to do it, and then you get to see if that's for you or not.
Hell yeah.
You know, I think it's a good trial. That's why I started, and that's why I stayed. So
And
yeah.
you felt the love for it, like you said, that drug, that
Yeah.
first hit.
It's like you will never take away that taste of dirt.
Hell yeah. Awesome, man. That's cool. Gotta love the dirt. Well, thank you, Sebastian. This has been a
You're
very
welcome.
fascinating talk. So thank you very much
My
for having
pleasure.
us. And you have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.